That's the question. In fact, at one time I had a online course called "How Do You Do It All?" because that
Oh,
was the exact question people were always asking me, and I have a two-part answer. I don't,
okay.
and I redefine what it all
Right.
means.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back today for day 3 with Jo Tate. This is part of our Meet the Cast lineup, and I'm so excited to have Jo on with me this week. We have been talking about single parent homeschooling. We've talked a little bit about what to do when life just gets really complicated. How do we handle that? And that's whether you're a single parent or not, because it's hard to know, like, how do we balance all of this stuff? And so one of the things that Jo, you have learned to balance through the years is home business. And, homeschooling is a full-time job on its own, and being a parent is a full-time job on its own.
Amen.
And then you throw in a home business to it. How in the world do you do it all?
Well, that's the question. In fact, at one time I had a online course called "How Do You Do It All?" because that
Oh,
was the exact question people were always asking me, and I have a two-part answer. I don't.
okay.
And I redefine what it all
Right.
means. That's the short, sassy answer, but there obviously are a lot of steps to that because the truth is nobody can do it all. It's
Right.
an illusion, it's a lie, it's a burden that nobody can bear.
Yeah.
And so, what you have to do is learn. You have to grow and see the possibilities for your life and the way things are now.
Mhm.
You have to know, get some education, learn about business, figure out what it is that you want to do. Uh, I would suggest you're looking at what you love to do, what you're really good at, what you may already be doing in some way, and frankly, what people are willing to pay money for, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's not a business, it's a hobby. Nothing wrong with
Right.
hobbies, but they won't pay the electric bill.
Right.
So grow, know, and go. Once you learn these things and figure them out, you have to take action and apply what you've learned and build on it. You have to get out of your comfort zone, particularly if you've not had a home business before. It can be kind of a scary endeavor. I
Sure.
had already been editing part time and even wrote my first book before I was a single mom and just sort of fit those things in on the side. But when my husband left, I had to take what had been a part time, sometime editing business and build it up into something that could support my family. God provided a lot of other ways during those years that I was building it up, and I'm thankful for that. But home business fits well with homeschooling. And in fact, sometimes you can even involve your kids in your home business, particularly if you have a business that involves packing and shipping and things like that. But the truth is that in order to add a home business, you have to subtract something else. You cannot just take a life that's already at 100% capacity and say, hey, I'm going to start a business on top of this. You have to find something you can let go of. There's an opportunity cost to every choice that we make.
Mhm.
If we're going to say yes to one thing, we're going to have to say no to some other things. One of the things that was most helpful for me was setting goals. And I know that sounds like old hat for a lot of people, but setting goals literally on a piece of paper every week was revolutionary, especially when I was just getting started. I like to set goals in 3 categories: personal, family, and business. There's a little bit of overlap, especially for homeschoolers, but they need to be specific and measurable. You need to write them down and you need to share them with somebody who can hold you accountable. And this helps you keep things in balance. They're not going to be identical every week, and you're not always going to have exactly the same amount of time to each of these areas of personal and family and business. Some weeks there's going to be more things in one category than the other, but this gets you a feel for the patterns of your life. And for me, Sunday afternoons were a good time to review the week that was just finished and to set goals for the week ahead so that when Monday morning started, I could sort of hit the ground running. Taking just half an hour every week for planning and setting goals will help you, it will multiply your productivity and really help to relieve stress and frustration.
When you say that you took a half hour to set goals for the week ahead, are you talking about setting like personal goals or homeschooling goals or everything?
Everything. I
Okay.
literally would have 3 categories on my paper. I know some people actually fold a piece of paper into thirds. For me, I typed a list and taped it to my bathroom mirror. But I literally have like bold, all cap color headings. One is labeled personal. That's where I put goals like remembering to take new supplements or
Hmm.
trying to build the discipline of getting up at a consistent time or exercising, or if I'm having lunch with a friend, anything like that goes on there. The family section is going to include specific homeschooling goals, extracurricular activities, maybe special events, something that we're going to do, a field trip, anything like that. And then business, of course, obviously anything to do with home business goes in there, deadlines, clients that you need to talk to, projects you need to complete, all that kind of thing.
Right.
And
And
just
I would
see,
imagine they kind of repeat, many of
oh
them, they
yeah,
kind of overlap and repeat. So
absolutely.
it's not like you're setting new goals every
Right.
single week.
Right. But you're tracking yourself, and I've
Sure.
found I actually keep some of my goals on my phone now, so that every day I can hold myself accountable for things like, am I taking all the nutritional supplements that I need to
Right.
have to maintain my health?
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
proud to say that I've written all next to every day for about a month now. I'm real proud of myself for that.
Nice. I love checklists. Are you one of
Yes.
those people who, like, after you've accomplished something, if you don't have a checklist for it, will you make a checklist so that you can have the satisfaction of checking it off?
How
I
did
do.
you know? Where's the
I do
hidden
that.
camera? You nailed me, absolutely, because there's such a sense of accomplishment to check
Yes.
something off a list of goals.
Yeah, I love it. I do that myself. I'm like, oh, did that? Yep. I'm going to write that
Yep,
on my list and check it off.
I think we're twins separated at birth.
I think so too. One of the things that I appreciate that you talked about is doing what you love to do and what God created you to do,
Mhm.
because we talk all the time on the podcast about how God created each one of us on purpose and for a purpose. And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes it's hard to figure out what that is, but God has gifted each one of us with a certain ability and talent and gifting
Mhm.
to do something. And
Absolutely.
I strongly believe that we all have a purpose in his kingdom,
Mhm.
and that he's given us an ability to impact his kingdom in some way. Now, that could mean working at a grocery store
Mhm.
and talking to people about Jesus.
Mhm.
But whatever that is, I think it's important for us to hone in on that. But I do want to ask you a question, because you kind of blew past this, but you said, you spent years, you had started editing and you wrote your
Mhm.
first book before you became a single parent. And then afterwards, you had to spend some time building up your
Mhm.
business as an
Mhm.
editor, but that God had provided for you during
Mhm.
that time
Mhm.
of, building up your
Mhm.
business.
Mhm.
Can you share with us maybe some of the ways that God did provide for you during that time?
Absolutely. Number one, I have the best mom and dad on the whole planet. They helped us financially. They were not wealthy people. My mom has passed on since then. My
Mhm.
dad is still living and is still a blessing to us. They were not wealthy, but they helped us and frankly tided us over in ways. To
Wow.
be honest, there were a few years at the beginning where we were on food stamps because my
Mhm.
income was so low while I was building up that we qualified. I really struggled with that. But we were in circumstances that qualified and that were the kind of safety net that it was intended for. And one of my happiest days in my business was the day that I got a check that was so large that it immediately disqualified me.
Nice.
And so but there are safety nets. The church helped us, as I mentioned before when I was talking about ways people can help single parents. Sometimes I would receive anonymous gifts from the Deacons Fund. One year I posted books for sale online, and not only did people buy books, but I found $200 cash in my mailbox to buy Christmas gifts for my kids.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's neat to see how God is just faithful during these times when it just seems like, you know, we don't know what to do. I mean, we've had many situations like that. I remember one time going to the mailbox. This was, 20 something years ago, and we just had a really rough month. And I went to the mailbox and there was a check, and I can't remember exactly how much it was for, but it was like $100,
Hmm.
and it was unexpected. And at that time I was like, $100, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I just knew it was God's provision, and God does
Absolutely.
provide in the most amazing ways. Let's take a
Absolutely.
quick break. We'll be right back.
You're not inadequate. You are perfectly capable. I mean, what is it about a parent that when their child turns 5, all of a sudden the parent's no longer a viable option? Like, oh, you're done. Now it's the school's turn.
I think the quality of education has steadily deteriorated in America. There is an agenda to steal our children.
You feel inadequate because you've been taught by our school system that you're inadequate.
We had no frame of reference for homeschooling other than it just seemed like torture. Like, why would a sane woman choose to be locked up with her kids for 18 years in a row when a school bus would come and take them away and give you like a 9-hour break every day?
No one knows your child better than you do, and no one loves your child more than you do.
And homeschooling changes the game on everything. Homeschooling allows us to say to the child, what sort of life do you want? What sort of God-given dreams, talents, and abilities is he speaking into you?
When we think about classroom education and we ask what makes for good education, almost every professional educator will say low student-teacher ratio, teachers who care, good methods, good curriculum. Well, in homeschooling, you get the best of all of those things.
What we discovered is that it's very efficient to homeschool.
You have the person who knows the student the best. You have the ability to customize the curriculum around the student. You have a great student-teacher ratio.
And I realized I am accomplishing with Sierra in 25 minutes to an hour every day what is taking the school system 8 hours a day, 5 days a week to accomplish with my older daughter. I loved watching the light bulb come on and watching her want to sit down and read with me. And I loved spending time with her.
There are just so many benefits, including being able to have a relationship with your own children.
Continue doing what you're doing. Don't give up, because I do believe that homeschool moms are America's greatest heroes.
We are back with Mary Jo. I love that you're talking about home business and just what it looks like to have a full-time job on top of homeschooling and parenting and, being the chauffeur and being the nurse and being all the things.
All the things.
But how do you balance work with actually being there for your kids? I have found this to be difficult myself. I don't work a lot, but I do work some. As obviously I'm working right now. We're doing the podcast. Yeah. And so sometimes I find it really difficult to balance those two things. And I feel like I'm constantly like, sorry, girls, I can't talk to you right now because I have to send an email. I have to make a phone call. I have to podcast. And I definitely have learned to say no. I mean, that's probably been the biggest thing for me, is that I've learned that some things I just have to say no. I just can't do this thing that you're asking me to do to other people so that I can be there with my kids.
Right.
But how did you find that balance?
Well, balance is one of my favorite words. That's what's in the subtitle of my book. And ironically, it's sort of disparaged in some places today. But for me, finding balance partly is mindset. We often talk about juggling our responsibilities. But you know what happens when you juggle? You end up dropping the ball.
Yeah.
And so I think that tightrope walking is a better metaphor. I remember watching Nick Walinda cross Niagara Falls and later the Grand Canyon. And I heard an interview with him where he talked about how he uses the balance pole as an extension of his arms to help him balance and adjust. He talked about adjusting to changing conditions, so that if he's up there and a gust of wind comes along, he can use that pole to regain his balance and not fall off into the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
If the cable that he's walking on starts to bounce, he will actually kneel on the wire. I saw him do it. It freaked me out, but he knows how to do it. He will kneel until the wire stabilizes. And to me, that's a beautiful metaphor of the life of busy parents trying to balance all of those activities. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. So you have to find a pace that you can maintain for the long haul. Now, what's interesting is, as I mentioned, a lot of people criticize the idea of balance, say that it's a false goal, that it can't even be done. And I think that's because we're thinking about balance a different way. I think the critics of balance are looking at it as a pie chart with every slice of pie being exactly the same size. And I don't think that's a very good image. I look at it more as that old-fashioned balance scale like Lady Liberty has, where you've got a dish on each side. And if you put in exactly the same number of feathers on one side and exactly the same number of rocks on the other side, it wouldn't balance, would it?
Right.
It's not about spending an equal amount of time and attention on everything. It's about spending an appropriate amount of time and attention on everything. And what is appropriate shifts. And that's why I go back to the sort of weekly goal setting and review that I talked about, because that's when you figure out how your life is shifting and how you can make the adjustments that you need. You need to eliminate as much as possible and prioritize the rest. You have to say no to good things. Man, that's hard to do. It's easy to say no to bad things, but hard to say no to good things. But you have to say no to the good so you can say yes to the best. You need to be very intentional and selective about outside commitments like extracurricular activities. And don't let the necessity of running your business crowd out precious family time. There are times when we do have to say no. And I'm sorry I'm not available now, but we had a family movie night every Friday night, no matter what was going on. We watched a movie and had popcorn, and the kids slept on the floor. I went to my bed like a sensible person, but they loved camping out in the living room. And so you just have to uh, find ways to give that appropriate amount of attention to every area of your life and not neglect one for the other. And it's a constantly shifting process.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is great encouragement. Let me ask you another hard question. So this doesn't have to do with balance, but how do you handle interruptions from your kids? Because obviously when you're working at home, and I shouldn't just say from your kids, there are interruptions. And this, again, this is something that I really struggle with is it's, my phone is dinging with text messages or Facebook, messages. Right. Or phone calls, or there's always something. And then, my girls, and I hate to use the word interruption because I don't feel like my girls are ever an interruption to me, that almost has a connotation of like they're a disruption or inconvenience to me. And that is not at all what I mean. My girls and my husband are my priority. Right. And especially, during the homeschool day when I am focused on them. But how do you, when you're working from home, especially, how do you handle all of the things that are thrown at you throughout the day?
Well, you saved the tough one for last, didn't you? What do we got for this one? 45 minutes?
Yeah.
I'm not thinking quite that long. But yeah, I think this is really where the rubber meets the road. And as you've already acknowledged, interruptions can distract us. They can hinder our productivity, but they can also trigger bad attitudes, make us irritable, and most insidious, they can confuse us about what's really important. You were careful not to say, call your children interruptions. Okay, technically they are interrupting you if they come in while you're trying to record a podcast. Right. But we do need to see them as blessings, not hindrances. Right. And yet we have to find ways to set boundaries. And as you acknowledged too, it's not just your family. There are, you can be interrupted by activities and stuff and people. We're going to spend the most time talking about people, but activities, overcommitment can be an interruption. And so you have to edit your life, eliminate things, and focus on what each person in your family is passionate about and let the rest go. You can be your own biggest hindrance and interruption by having bad attitudes like pride, whining. It's hard to say this as an editor. Perfectionism can be a trap, fear, false guilt. And so I encourage you, instead of saying, I can't do this, to ask, how can I? And that can create a great attitude shift. Family, let's face it, for the homeschooling family, an awful lot of our interruptions or distractions or whatever we want to call it do in fact come from family members. And so just as you were acknowledging, we have to find a balance between accessibility, which allows interruptions, and boundaries, which are intended to prevent interruptions. Boundaries of time and space. We want to be accessible, include our children in our work when we can, and be really there during family time. That was a hard one for me. Yeah. But we do need boundaries where we're not accessible. Boundaries of time means you're not available on demand all the time. It depends on the ages of your children. If you have a toddler, you do in fact have to be available all the time.
Right.
You need to be sensitive to important interruptions, but you also need uninterrupted time for planning and reflection and Bible study and maybe even a sanity break. If you, time blocking can be really useful. Something, maybe you have mornings for school, afternoons for independent lessons, and evenings for chores and home business work or whatever, whatever works for your family. You can use your kids' nap time when they're young, but don't sacrifice your own sleep. I used to work in 1 hour blocks of time. And so when I would go to my office to edit, I would tell the kids, I'm about to edit for an hour. What do you need from me before I get started? I also train them to ask themselves, how would you handle it if I weren't here? For
Mm.
example, they interrupted my work, but they did not wake me up if I was taking a nap. Somehow I managed to inculcate the seriousness of that to them, and it was a lifesaver. My youngest son, I forget how old he was when this happened, but I think he was maybe about fifth or sixth grade. He actually figured out on his own to, when he came into my office, to look over my shoulder at the computer screen. And if a Word document was up there, he knew I was editing and he should go away and come back later if it wasn't an emergency. But if I had Facebook open, it was probably interruptible. So I like that he was able to figure that out on his
Yeah.
own. We also need boundaries of space. This is especially if you have a home business. It's great to spend a lot of time in the family room or the kitchen with a laptop or a tablet. I know some people who have written homeschool curriculum on their kitchen table in the middle of family chaos. That would
Yeah.
not work for me.
Me
But
neither.
yeah, having some kind of a separate area, even a separate room with a door, so you can set your work up separately, maybe a foyer or a bedroom or a freestanding folding screen, and you need mental concentration for some kinds of work. Sometimes it involves having childcare. I had babysitters, teenage girls come to the house sometimes to work with my kids and help them with lessons and even and do household chores. We need to teach our kids independence, initiative, and responsibility. There are seasons of life. Older kids can do more than younger kids can. Some of my favorite memories are finding out that my third son had taught my fourth son how to use the toaster because he was tired of toasting his freezer waffles for him. And another time I came into the kitchen to find the 5-year-old teaching his oldest big brother how to cook an omelet.
Oh,
So,
wow.
kids can do a lot of things independently and taking initiative. If they can learn to do things on their own initiative, because micromanaging is inefficient.
Yeah.
Delegating household chores. Oh my goodness, my kids did all the work of running the house, taking care of the pets, taking care of the yard, cleaning the house, doing all of the laundry except my personal clothing. And I have joked for years that I was going to have to hire a staff when my kids left home. And I'm starting to see that because I know this is going to come as a shock. Just this year, I have had to start cleaning my own bathroom and emptying my own trash for the first time in something like 15 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
But my two sons who are married, and the two who aren't married know this too, but they're just not practicing it as much. They know how to run a household. I have very grateful daughters-in-law because of what my boys have learned.
Yeah.
And so that's important. Other people as well. People have, you can't have an inappropriate sense of obligation. You cannot say yes to everybody.
Yeah.
Don't answer the phone if you're working. I turn the ringer off my phone. You don't have to answer every text message, every email. One of my favorite tips is to reply to phone messages or text by email. Hardly anybody calls anymore, but you do not have to be available 24/7 just because technology allows you to do it. I never answer the doorbell. you know, um, and you have to be cautious about recreational use of technology as well. Social media is a wonderful tool. It can create a lot of opportunities and a lot of fellowship and wonderful resources, just like I know our conversation is going to be shared partly on social media.
Right.
But if we go on Facebook first thing in the morning and check, an hour can disappear before we finish it. So
Yeah.
just be a good steward of the resources that you have and figure out ways to manage your time wisely, but be open to God's leading. And for me, giving some practical tips about how to manage and avoid and handle interruptions. But ultimately, God is in control of our time. And
Yeah.
sometimes interruptions happen despite our best laid plans. So I encourage you to pray for discernment to know how to respond to each situation. Sometimes the appropriate response is to ignore an interruption and continue with the task at hand. And other times, an interruption is a signal to be sensitive to God's timing and an opportunity to serve someone who really needs you. And I love this quote from C.S. Lewis. It's from one of his letters. He said, "What one calls the interruptions are precisely one's real life, the life God is sending one day by day." And that for me, that's the bottom line.
Amen. Oh, that is great encouragement. That was like a fire hose right there. So
Yes.
people are going to
That was
have
the
to
short
go back.
version.
Yeah.
There's a
Oh,
whole
goodness.
chapter in my book just on interruptions.
Okay. And your book, again, we mentioned it in the first
Yeah.
episode, is called Flourish. What's the full
Balance
title
for
of it?
Flourish, Balance for Homeschool Moms.
Okay.
And as I mentioned in an earlier episode, it is out of print now, but I have several cases in my library. And so I'm happy to fill orders. You can get it through my website, flourishathome.com, and it's also available in digital format as well.
Awesome. Okay. You guys would be so encouraged by that book. Order it from her website. You can still get it. I think if you look for it on Amazon, you probably won't find it except for the digital version. But definitely an excellent book. So I'm going to ask you one last question. I did not tell you I was going to ask you this because I didn't think about it until we were recording.
That is fine.
But I'm going to throw this at you and you're going to have a really hard time answering it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
With your 50 million books that you have in your home, what are your top 3 favorite books?
Somebody asked me top 3 last night.
Really?
And I'm going to cheat on you just like I did on her. All right. So, Eudora Welty's memoir, One Writer's Beginnings, Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, The Great Gatsby, and To Kill a Mockingbird. Oh, and The Hiding Place. That's 6.
Oh,
sorry. I told you earlier,
that
I
was
don't
4.
do numbers, I do words.
Well, I love that you said The Hiding Place because that is one of my favorite books. That is actually, I think if I were stranded on an island and I could only take 3 books with me, I would take my Bible, The Hiding Place, and The Little House on the Prairie series because I consider that all one book.
I love those two. The series cut as one book, which reminds me that I left out Jan Karen's Mitford series and The Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh, goodness.
So
okay.
those 8 are my top 3.
Okay. I love it. This is not about math. We're not talking about math. So
there you go. Absolutely not. And, I love, very few people leave a conversation with me without a book recommendation. And we run out of time to talk deeply about books. But if you love to read, if you would like to learn how to be a better reader, I have a Facebook page called Avid Readers. It's Avid Readers, Mary Jo Tate. The easiest way to find it is avidreaders.net. And we have a lot of fun talking about what we're reading. Warning, it can be a little bit dangerous to either your book budget or your library tote bag, but it's a lot of fun.
That's so fun. Well, I'm constantly throwing out resources at our people, at our audience, saying, go buy this, go buy that, go buy this, go buy that. And I told them before, I said, people need to just have their own Schoolhouse Rocked bank account so that when we have all of these amazing resources, they can just pull from that account and it's all in the budget and it's all good in the end. So, so thank you again, Mary Jo, so much. We will put all of your links in the show notes and I'll try to get those books from you. I mean, the list of books that you rattled off so that we can add those to the show notes as well. And people can maybe look at those. Thank you so much this week for joining us and for the encouragement that you have brought to me, to single parents, and to those who are even just trying to work from home, whether single or not. There's so much wisdom in everything that you shared this week, and I really do appreciate your time very much.
Well, thanks so much, Yvette. It has been a real joy. It is a delight to me to be able to encourage others and to share how God has worked in my own life as a source of inspiration and encouragement for other people. And I'm excited to see how God will be working in the lives of everybody who's listening.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for being part of the movie, too. This was part of our Meet the
so
Cast
fun.
lineup. That was fun. We filmed with you in Franklin, Tennessee, which is not too far from where you live. So that was really exciting to get to do that. As a matter of fact, Janice Campbell, we had interviewed her and she said, you've got to get Mary Jo Tate in this movie. And I was like, okay.
I love Janice.
She's so sweet. So she's going to be on the podcast actually in a few weeks, and we're excited to get her on as well. So thank you for your time this week. You are a blessing. Thank you guys for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and we will see you back here on Monday with another great guest. Bye.